And again, I'm sorry to my fans. I wasn't trying to dox your shit, man. Just trying to dox the trolls, you know?
Radio Free Innsmouth episode 268, following up the Sabbat episode with an Abigail episode. Because the way I see it, as far as Japanese black metal goes, the unholy trinity of old school Japanese black metal bands would be Sabbat, Psy, and Abigail. And I enjoy them roughly in that order. You know, I used to like Psy a little bit more than Sabbat. Now I like Sabbat a little bit more than Psy. Regardless, all three of those, pretty much essential listening.
그리고 진짜 제가 해보고 싶은 게
You know, I never thought about that before. Isn't it interesting that all three of those bands are essentially led by their bassist? I mean, with Psy, you got Mirai Kawashima being the founder and face of the band. Same thing going on with Sabbat and Gezel. And then in Abigail, you got Yasuyuki Suzuki is like the main dude. And all three of those guys are the band's bassists. You know, it's just kind of funny because usually bass tends to be this maligned instrument as far as black metal stereotypes go. Maybe it's just because they all have that big, you know, influence from Kronos and Venom. Although to be fair, I would listen to any three of these bands, or Bulldozer, or Hellhammer, or Bathory, 9.75 times out of 10 before I'd ever actually listen to Venom. Anti-Nordic tryhards stay losing.
He's just trying to rile you up.
I am not mad. I'm not fucking mad. It's actually funny how not mad I am right now.
The .25 is to account for the fact that Massacre's cover of the Venom song Warhead with Kronos on vocals has been a steady fixture of my gym playlist going back years. Shit goes hard as fuck, fam. But speaking of the band Venom, out of all three of the classic old school Japanese black metal bands, it's actually Abigail that are the most Venom adjacent, despite the fact that they're named after a King Diamond album. Like Sabbat, they've got a whole lot of new wave of British heavy metal influence, but it's way less Angel Witch and Grim Reaper and way more Venom and Holocaust, Warfare, way more punk, way more hard rock to their sound. And lyrically, they're very Venom adjacent too because, you know, they do the standard
kill Christ cucks, behead Christ cucks, roundhouse kick a Christ cuck into the concrete, slam dunk a Christ cuck baby into the trash can.
Classic black metal bit, but they also got plenty of lyrics about banging chicks.
Do you prefer tits or us?
Drinking a whole lot of beers and indulging in violent criminal shenanigans. When they first started, they actually dubbed themselves
the most evil band in Japan.
And this aspect of their sound can be most clearly seen on their 1994 7-inch Descending from a Blackened Sky, which is not only named after one of the coolest Bathory lyrical lines of all time, but it might also be my personal favorite Abigail release, and I never see anybody fucking talk about it. It might just about have the perfect raw black metal production in that it sounds like it's coming out of a fucking sewer, and yet all the different instrumental elements are perfectly distinguishable. In terms of the production quality alone, this is one of the most evil sounding black metal albums, right up there with Immortal's Diabolical Full Moon Mysticism and Darkthrone's Under a Funeral Moon. But more important than that, the songwriting itself is very evil, satanic in its construction. For instance, you know, you go into this sort of melodic, atmospheric type riff, you think you're building up to maybe some very epic sort of section, but instead Yasuyuki tricks you by completely subverting your expectations of what's going to happen next. And he even proceeds to laugh at you after he's pulled this trick. Interestingly enough, despite the fact that a lot of the people that really go out of their way to shit on Scandinavian-style black metal tend to hold up Abigail as an example of black metal done correctly, a lot of Abigail songs from this era of their sound very Scandinavian to me. I mean, you're hearing all these like epic turnarounds with the really big atmospheric melodic riffs that still manage to be completely necrotic in aspect. The riff you're hearing right now wouldn't sound entirely out of place in an early Darkthrone album, if you ask me. Another trademark early Abigail-style turnaround section, of course. Absolutely evil-sounding stuff. Earlier on, I kind of intimated that there was a lot of punk and hard rock influence to Abigail's sound. That aspect of their particular sonic palette would become much more pronounced later on, but even in these early days, it's still definitely there. There's a lot of riffs on this album that sound like groovy horror punk guitar parts given a fresh black metal coat of paint, and then they'll kind of mix those in with more standard fast black metal riffs. Often you'll even have riffs that start out as fast black metal and then kind of transition into that groovier style, merely by virtue of changing the drum beat going on under it. They'll rock that groove for a while, then jump back into the fast black metal stuff. It's been the same riff the whole time. He's just playing it different ways before finally jumping back into that very catchy intro riff that he started the song off with. This will give him an opportunity to go even more kind of black and roll with it. Like this bit right here, without the drum beat under it, you can almost think it was a St. Vitus riff. Really interesting marching doom-like cadence to it. For such an ultra-traditionalist band, descending from a blackened sky shows that Abigail is willing to try a whole lot of different things, including a pretty interesting stab at dungeon synth. This isn't even just like a little intro or segue. This is a complete song in and of itself, and it's very well done, particularly if you enjoy this style of like early 90s black metal synth work, which I of course do because I am a man of taste and distinction. And it's really kind of confounding to me that people don't talk about Descending from a Blackened Sky more often. There's just so much cool shit going on it. But yeah, despite being a reasonably old band, Abigail doesn't really get around to putting out a proper full-length album until 1996. And this is when the Abigail that most people are familiar with starts to rear its ugly head with the wonderfully titled Intercourse and Lust, which of course is a reference to the classic Sodom song, Sodom Your Lust, albeit with the words changed around because Yasuyuki Suzuki wants you to know that he is not, in fact, and his paternal figure most certainly does not give him boners. Speaking of that wonderful Abigail sleaze factor, the edition of the album that I own actually has a cover featuring the classic woodblock painting Dream of the Fisherman's Wife, which is probably the first historically recorded instance of tentacle porn. The groovy hard rock black and roll riffs are in full effect on this album, and the most evil band in Japan feeling has definitely returned from the Descending from a Blackened Sky EP. It's just that now it's less of an occult conspiratorial variety of evil and more of an everyday street level style of nastiness. This feeling is of course enhanced by Yasuyuki's inimitable vocal stylings. In fact, out of the Unholy triad of Japanese black metal bands, he might have my favorite vocal style. He's a nice little Celtic Frost style riff. Speaking of which, he even does a little Tom G. Warrior style before heading into a chaotic old school black metal style guitar solo. But while the atmosphere on this album might be a little bit more normal sounding than the all over the place wackiness of Descending from a Blackened Sky, there's still plenty of weirdness going on Intercourse and Lust, particularly on the two long songs that end side A and side B respectively. Strength of Other Worlds starts out with the standard sort of Abigail take on blackened hard rock, 80s hardcore punk riffs, sped up considerably and of course made all the more vicious by Yasuyuki's particularly hostile sounding vocal performance. Going into the song's rising action, everything seems, pretty standard for Abigail, but then after the drum fill hits, the listener gets slapped with this much more evil sounding riff that bridges into some really weird kind of psychedelic bass playing led section, acoustic guitars, which further unfolds into a very sleazy sounding section. The song really earns its 7-minute runtime because it's got so many different parts to it. Weird chaotic guitar solos, very oddly groove-based, for black metal at least, style riffs that then get kind of turned inside out and re-examined in a new context once the drums kick back in, making everything all punk sounding, speeding up, getting more and more intense as the song progresses, before initiating another standard Abigail-style collapse where it's just the drums and the bass doing some kind of weird psychedelic thing, eventually jumping back into like a Scandinavian-style, harsh, dissonant black metal riff. For a band that's so self-consciously primitive, honestly, the songwriting on this album gets pretty complex and strange. The side B ender goes even weirder, because in addition to being the most evil band in Japan, around this time Abigail started calling themselves street metal. I keep it real! Accordingly, this song is entitled Hail Yakuza. starts off very fast and chaotic with some very mayhem circa 1987 style black metal guitar riffs, and classically nasty sounding Yasuyuki Suzuki vocals. Once we get through a few repetitions of that section, buckle up, we're going on a ride into the depths of the Japanese criminal underworld, with another section led entirely by clean guitars, drums, and odd fuzzy bass. It's really laid back sounding stuff for Abigail, but it has a very effective sort of sinister atmosphere to it, which is further enhanced by some almost Burzum sounding droning riffs, as well as the incorporation of some very effective samples taken from various and sundry yakuza media properties.
10 years in the joint made you a fucking pussy. Bring that shit, Kazuma.
But we're not going to be hanging out in ambient land for the rest of the song, because it does speed up again and starts to get back into more classically evil sounding black metal, and it sort of waffles between these two extremes over the entire course of its mammoth 9-minute runtime, as well as incorporating a whole lot of classic traditional heavy metal, hard rock, and punk elements. Honestly, whilst Descending from a Blackened Sky is probably my favorite Abigail album, Hey Yakuza is unquestionably my favorite Abigail song, particularly due to its incredibly well-written ending section, where the samples descend into chaotic violence, and the riffs take a turn for an almost Grand Belial's Key style of mockingly evil guitar melodies. There's a bit of a Japanese folk music sound coloring it as well. Overall, just like really cool stuff going on in this song and on this album. After Intercourse and Lust, there was a bit of a member shakeup. Original guitarist Yasunori Nagamine ended up leaving. The music didn't change that much because Yasuyuki was already writing most of it anyways, but it definitely took a turn for the more kind of normal blackened punk sort of sound. The album covers, lyrics, and overall presentation got even raunchier too. I mean, check out the second Yakuza full-length, the charmingly entitled Forever Street Metal Bitch.
You are hentai?
The weird, long, wandering song structures at this point are pretty much a thing of the past for Abigail. In its place, we have a whole lot more 80s thrash metal influence than was ever present on their older stuff, and the song titles and lyrics get a whole lot more like goofier, but also more aggressive. So you get Satanic Metal Fucking Hell, I Am Holocaust, Ready for Fucking Drunk, We're the Pussy Hunter, Bitch We Gonna Kill You. You know, that sort of classy thing. Kind of like Sarcophago if they were also porn addicts. Punk influence is also drastically increased, as evidenced by this speedy little number here. Most of the later Abigail stuff, yeah, I think it's pretty fucking cool. There's not too much I can say about it. It's fast, hardcore punk, the wave of British heavy metal influenced primitive black metal stuff. And much like with Sabbat and Metal Lucifer, Yasuyuki Suzuki also started a more heavy metal style side project named Barbatos after the last song on the Descend from Blackened Skies EP, Count Barbatos. As you can no doubt tell from the riff you're hearing right now, the sleaze factor was up considerably, not only in regards to sound, but also regarding song titles. Like, if you want to have a good time, just read through the entire track list of Rocking Metal Motherfucker. What a title. The Venom, Motorhead, Merciful Fate, and Holocaust influences are all over this stuff. Like Metal Lucifer, it's decidedly more kind of like fun sounding than the comparatively more straight-laced standard Abigail material. But if you like Abigail, you're gonna like this stuff because it's sonically pretty similar. It's just a re-examination of the same subject matter through a slightly different contextual lens. Yasuyuki even did a split release with his main band Abigail and Barbatos entitled Sexual Metal Holocaust. Which, I mean, you gotta listen to Barbatos just for that, dude. But for me, the most interesting Barbatos album is the third full-length, Fury and Fear, Flesh and Bone. This one's definitely an album of two different sides, both of which feature collaborations with different musicians. Side B of the album features a bunch of songs from Rocking Metal Motherfucker reworked with Joel Grind from Toxic Holocaust on vocals, which actually got me to check Toxic Holocaust out back in the day. I had kind of initially assumed that they were just another sort of stupid Municipal Waste style retro thrash band. But no, the Joel Grind guy got some real metal cred to him. I actually prefer the production on these versions of the Rocking Metal Motherfucker songs to their initial album version because it's like a lot rawer and nastier sounding, fits the material better. However, I still kind of prefer Yasuyuki's vocals, but it's cool to have, you know, like different versions of those songs at least. Side A of the record, however, is a much different animal because the guest contributor on this side of the album is none other than Chuck Keller from Aries Kingdom, one of my favorite bands from the US. He's actually been associated with Abigail even longer than Joel Grind had. having helped out with Yasuyuki writing lyrics on the very first Abigail full-length. And appropriately, this side of the album has a much more epic feel to it. Most of the lyrics are about like war and history. Very Ares Kingdom adjacent, as a matter of fact. So yeah, no, Barbatos, they're pretty fucking cool. Later Abigail, pretty fucking sick. But that first Abigail full-length and the EP right before it, that's some of the best black metal of all time. If you're gonna get any Abigail, I'd suggest you get those. But you should probably just listen to all of it, dude. It's pretty sick. Hopefully you thought this episode was pretty sick. Even if you didn't, thanks for watching or listening or whatever you did, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Get the fuck off of fucking, oh, god damn it. Fuck off of me.